Good morning, everybody. It is Cathy Haig here at the Magical Urban Vegetable Garden, and it is actually bright and sunny here. I hope it is where you are too. And I wanted to share some tips with you that I have used over the years. Some of them I've used, some of them I have yet to use because I haven't really needed them. But I have friends that do or whatever, and they're natural, they're easy, and it helps with all those pests that end up destroying our food crops, especially, which are super important. And we put a lot of hard work into that. We want to be able to have to feed our families and to know where our food comes from. So one of the first things, and if you've been in gardening any amount of time, crop rotation is really important. Trying to plant things not in the same place every year, moving things around. But sometimes we have really small spaces and maybe we don't have the ability to move things around as much as possible. I have that in areas of my garden. Like I have certain places like my greenhouse where I have to grow tomatoes every year, and they just don't do well outside here. And so I can only do so much rotation in there as needed. So I have to use other things if pests come up. So, but if you have the ability, even in a small space, to move things around, it's always a good idea. Number two, floating row covers. Now, I don't have any handy. I was hoping to pick some up because I need some new ones here. Mine have finally disintegrated after the last few years, but they're just not available here yet. You can buy them online, and I suggest having them handy before you plant, or right away as soon as possible. You can order them on Amazon, garden centers, all sorts of things. Now, floating row covers, when you Google them, are white, quite sheer, but they're durable. They're a durable sort of biodegradable white fabric that that you can get various thicknesses. So there's light, middle, and heavyweight. For the purposes that we're talking here, we're talking lightweight because basically all we're trying to do is prevent things like potato beetles and, cabbage moths from getting to our cabbages and things like this. They're cheap. You can usually buy like a 25-foot length for, I don't know, 10 to 15 bucks, depending on where you get it from. Maybe they're a little bit more now. And you can take and cut them to length. I've had people say, but my garden isn't 25 feet, so cut it to the length that you need. And I'll get to how to use them properly in a minute, because using them properly is really essential to preventing issues. But the light, medium, and heavyweight, your heavyweight ones are super handy to have. Like if you're trying to grow things outside through fall and winter. A heavyweight one, depending on your climate and what your winter is like, can change the temperature of your soil and how your fall and winter vegetables are growing by up to 7 or 8 degrees. It's almost like a greenhouse effect. The nice thing with floating row covers is that you can water through them. The rain goes through them. And so for the purposes of what we're doing here through the summer and especially through the spring, you probably want lightweight ones. We're just trying to prevent for all those little creepy crawlies from getting to our food and destroying it before we get the chance at it, right? So a lightweight one, it's super important when you plant, okay? Don't wait until you have the problem. But when you plant, cover everything over right away. Because it's super lightweight and you can water through or the rain goes through, I've ended up propping it up just to give it, they're lightweight. You can actually let it rest on the soil and the plants will push it up. I like to give it a little bit of height in there just in case it needs a little bit more of a greenhouse effect. I've used sticks and kindling on occasion just to give it a little bit of a dome-like effect. But you can use like heavy duty wire to create inexpensive hoops, stick them in on either side of your rows or your raised beds, and then spread the fabric over top down the length of your rows. Now here's what's super important with this. You have to tuck that fabric in all the way around your bed, down 2 or 3 inches into the soil. so that any insects that come along, they will find any tiny little space that is not tucked in, and they will crawl through, and then you'll have, you know, whatever, eating your Brussels sprouts and your lettuces and cabbage and stuff. Now, this isn't going to help if you already have an in-soil problem, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it is going to prevent anything that's incoming as the season warms up. So just make sure that you've tucked it all in. Now, the other thing that I do, because you don't want to have to be lifting those off every few days, you know, to weed and water, I mulch everything. I use dull newspaper and cardboard between the rows and everything to help keep weeds down. And it also helps lessen your need for watering. And if you do need to water, you can use the sprinkler, or when it rains, it just goes right through. So basically you need to get in, just make sure that you've got enough water happening, maybe pull a few weeds or whatever, but you don't have to be doing it all the time. Floating row covers, have them in advance before you plant, and use them as soon as you've planted, and it's going to prevent you know, just a lot of issues before they ever happen. Now, the next one is one, you know, I've seen all kinds of controversial, you know, issues or topics come up, is BTK, or sometimes it's called BT, and it's got a big long Latin name that, you know, basically what it is, it's an enzyme. Okay, it's a naturally occurring enzyme, but of course it's in higher concentrations when you buy it. I have mine ready because it's always good to have it handy. Don't wait until you have an issue, because I swear everybody else will be having an issue as well, and you won't be able to find it when you need it. Okay, and just for the record, I'm not sponsored, I'm not affiliated with any of these. I'm just letting you know because I want you to have really good tools to work with this year. So BTK or BT, depending on where you live, is a super handy one. This works on tent caterpillars, this works on cabbage worms, and here's how it works. It is an enzyme, and it works on very high acid stomachs of caterpillars, which is basically any predator. You were talking like a pH of 11, like we're talking like, you know, melting you in a lye pit, a type of acidic. The key with using these, of course, I mean, you don't want to be destroying anything that's beneficial, is to use it according to directions. And your directions, if you read them, use it not on a windy day to prevent any drift. Now, there's very few beneficial insects that it will ever affect, but you don't want them taking it back to, you know, their larvae or anything and maybe destroying them. People are always like, oh my gosh, it's going to kill the bees. Bees have a pH of, they actually have a neutral pH, I believe. So it doesn't affect them, but I still am careful because I don't want them taking it anywhere and affecting something else in the larva stage. So I always use it on a day where there is, you know, no wind, there's no drift. And when is key. Like the only time I've ever used it, I've never even had to use it on cabbage worms because, you know, I usually have floating row covers. But I get tent caterpillars on my apple trees every spring. It's just a given thing around here that they are going to have, you know, caterpillars, you know, those big tent caterpillars. The birds won't even eat them. That's how, you know, that's how toxic they are. But to combat them, BTK is fabulous. But here's where the timing also is on them. Tent caterpillars show up just as soon as as blooming is done and when the little apples are actually starting to form. So you're not looking at you know, beneficial pollinators being around anyway. They're already done and gone. They're off looking for other stuff. BTK, because it's an enzyme, only lasts like a few days. I think it's like maybe 3 or 4 days. With sun and wind, it just dissipates and loses its strength. And you may have to do a second application. I think it's 10 or 14 days in. I don't know. Look at the instructions on your thing there. But anyway, the point is to the point is to keep an eye on it and to have it handy and to have your tools handy. So for BTK, a small bottle like this is very concentrated, and 2/3 of a bottle does a 5-gallon pail of water. I've figured out the solutions in it. So if you're doing, you know, much smaller amounts, like just a spray bottle for your cabbages and stuff every few days, you're going to have to figure out what your measurements are, because it won't keep its strength. You can't fill a bottle and have it for weeks. You need to use it right away, and you'll have to remix. So you don't want to go wasting, of course, but you have to keep it so that, you know, it has the strength that you need. In a bottle like this, 2/3 of a bottle with a 5-gallon pail, I do 9 apple trees, okay, every spring. All right, there's plenty there for most people for their entire season for what they do. Super brand. Safers has got a lot of good organic pest control products, by the way. Now, something else, and I even on my list here, is how to deal like with your cabbage, your cutworms. Okay, those grubs that crawl under the soil. And this is number 4 here. So cabbage worms or cutworms, sorry, they're not really the same thing. Cabbage worms are usually referred to the ones crawling around on them. Your cutworms are the ones that they live in the soil. They can live in the soil for several years until something good comes along. And they really like your cole crops. So cole crops are like your cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, collards, all those things that are in the cole family. And these guys just love that. And you'll think they're doing great. You'll have big, beautiful plants. They'll be almost ready to bloom. And you walk out one morning and they're like 3/4 dead, and you pull them up and you got these big fat grubs under there that have chewed through 3/4 of the stem, and there's nothing you can do. So there's a couple of ways that I have dealt with this over the years. I don't have chickens anymore, but I would put my chickens like in the greenhouse in the fall and winter for a couple hours here and there, so they could scratch through everything. They could eat worms and bugs, and they would completely clear that out. If you have chickens, letting them turn your soil, throw out compost and whatever, and they will turn the soil for you, and they will have a great time doing it. They will be healthy and happy, grubbing for whatever they want, and they will take care of most of those pests for you. But not everybody has chickens. Not everybody has the capability of chickens. So here's something else you can do. I just dropped it on the ground here. When you save like all your milk and juice cartons, like I was talking about a couple weeks ago there, and you cut off the top, like you cut off probably about 6 inches, right? You're going to be left with the top part. Cut off the remaining part, you know, at least 1.5 or 2 inches. I think this is a little bit more. This is probably closer to 3. But anyway, when you plant your cole crops, you want to insert this around them. What happens with this is where understanding the predator or issue that you're having. And so your cutworms live under the soil, obviously, but they crawl along between 1/2 to 1.5 inches under the soil. And if they meet with any kind of blockade, you know, rocks, they just go around and they keep looking. So when you plant your seedlings or you plant your seeds out in the garden, plant this around each one of your cole crops, okay? And I usually leave it to about 1/2 inch above the ground and make sure it's inserted right around. And it deters, you know, all these bugs, provided there's not one right, you know, inside there. But it'll prevent them getting to your crops, and you'll have beautiful crops, especially if you put the floating row cover over top. And so you don't have your cabbage worms and stuff. The cabbage moths getting to them, it's going to make a huge difference. And I like using all the cardboard milk and juice cartons because they do biodegrade. Your earthworms love them. If you forget to pull them out in the fall, it doesn't matter. The earth will take care of them, your earth and your earthworms. And it's an easy fix, okay? Number 5, and this is another big one, beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes, this is the wonder of science and the internet these days. We have so much more information available than our grandparents and great-grandparents did. Beneficial nematodes are basically like microscopic worms or that are naturally occurring in the soil, just not usually in the amounts that we need if we already have an issue. They feed depending on the life cycle of what it is that you're wanting to eliminate on the grubs or when they're at a certain stage. So here's how that works. Anything that has a life cycle stage, and there's a huge list, okay? Anything that has a life cycle stage, and we're talking pests, it doesn't affect anything beneficial. It doesn't affect your earthworms, anything like that. We're talking predators. We're talking things like fungus gnats, black vine weevils, white grubs, peach borers, Japanese beetles or chafer beetles, sod webworms, billy bugs, and crane flies. There's over 230. There's over like 230 pests like this that beneficial nematodes can help you eliminate, so that you're not having this issue. It's natural. They're naturally occurring. The thing is that with any kind of soil cycle, which all of these pests have, you have to catch them, it has to do with soil temperature and when their larvae or grubs start becoming active in the spring. So you have to time it right. Running out and buying it in the middle of the summer probably isn't going to do any good at all because your soil temperature is too hot and they're not even in the right larva stage. You have to time this right. So do your research, look up beneficial nematodes, look up near you where you can order them from online. But you have to have them handy so that when your soil hits that temperature, and it depends on what it is that you're trying to eliminate, you need to know what that is, and then you need to apply it. You're going to have only a smallish window in the spring to be able to do most of these, so you have to be prepared. Some of you might be too late depending on where you are, but you can prepare for next year. There's a lot of us that, if we've got time yet. It's cold here where we are. So you have time yet to do this. But beneficial nematodes, super handy. And it's something that every organic gardener, every gardener should have in their arsenal and be prepared for. So I hope that helps. Wherever it is that you're watching this, later if it's the replay, leave me a comment below. If you haven't already, make sure to like the page and subscribe, and let me know if this helps you at all. Maybe if you've used some of these, maybe you need more information. Whatever it is, you're welcome to leave me a comment or send me a message, and I will do my very best to help you out. So you have a fabulous Sunday. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.